Howdy, and welcome to your Greek Life New Member Orientation Program. On behalf of the Department of Student Life, the Office of Student Involvement and Leadership Programs, and your staff that work with Fraternity and Sorority Life, Miss Abby Howard, and all of the officers that are involved in IFC and Panhellenic recruitment, I want to say congratulations on your decision to look into fraternity and sorority membership. My name is Ann Goodman. I'm the Associate Vice President and Dean of Students here at New Mexico State, and I am thrilled to be with you, albeit virtually, and welcome you to what can potentially be some of the best years of your life. Your new community, your chapter that you're interested in joining, is part of a greater community, the Aggie Greek community. In fact, we have just over 400 students that are active in our fraternity and sorority chapters here. They make up membership in 8 national fraternities, 6 national sororities. And while you may find the learning curve to be a little bit more about your individual fraternity or sorority this year, you will start to recognize that it is part of a larger community. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about, is what does it mean to be Greek? What does it mean to be an Aggie Greek? I am a proud Aggie Greek. I graduated from New Mexico State in 1986 and 87, and I want to see this community thrive and grow and become better. So let's talk about what that might look like. Fraternities and sororities are values-based organizations. What that means is they have missions, purposes, and they have a set of values that they hold their membership accountable to. This image shows you some common values that are shared across over 100 different fraternity and sororities nationwide. They're concerned about and dedicated to excellence, dependability, respect, and honesty, and it's about being a part of something greater than yourself. Unfortunately, the rest of the world has many other opinions and thoughts about what fraternities and sororities look like. Oftentimes, fraternities are thought of as just focused on booze, babes, and brotherhood. They're seen for hazing people, sexually assaulting individuals, and in some cases, people consider them to be a rental agency for friends. Sororities, oftentimes they also carry the stigma of many of the stereotypes. If you've seen Legally Blonde or any of the movies that portray sorority women, they're often seen as being rich or elitist or just partiers, somebody out to find a good husband. But we know better. It's about being committed to the core values of the organization. The road ahead is going to be filled with lots of excitement for you and challenges. It's important to recognize, though, that by joining a fraternity or sorority, you're also making a lifetime commitment. In fact, by joining your chapter, you are, in essence, going to be picking up almost an extra 3 credit hours of a commitment in your schedule. You are also pledging your commitment to be an active and contributing member, and that's going to require you to make good decisions and plan to be successful both personally, that may mean academically as well, so that your chapter can be successful in its endeavors. So I want to talk about how you can think about being successful. And it starts with preparing to overcome some of those challenges or some of the barriers. If you're a pilot, it's always important that you have some sort of a plan. In this case, I want to use the analogy of the Miracle on the Hudson. And in this case, we had a plane that was about to crash. And in this case, they had several minutes to prepare, both the passengers and the pilots. And they used that time to review where their resources were, where the exits were, how many number of seats were there between the exit row and their seats. They looked at the situation to see, if we land on water, what kinds of things do we need to do? We need to make sure we have life vests. We make sure that we don't inflate it until we get out of the plane. We make sure that we have blankets or jackets, because if it's cold, we'll need those. So they made a plan, they assessed the situation, and then they followed directions and did the right thing, and ultimately the passengers all were safe in this matter. The same can be said for your organization membership and your success as a student in college. We want you to make a plan. We want you to recognize when there could potentially be a problem. We want you to do the right thing, assess the situation, and respond. And if you can't respond and you need help, that you reach out and you find the appropriate people who can be helpful. We want you to be an active participant in your success. Don't be a bystander. So how does this play out in the fraternity and sorority kind of a membership? Well, let's talk right off the bat about the bad rap that fraternities have related to sexual assault. They have a bad rap because, quite frankly, the research says that they are not necessarily successful at having productive or positive relationships. Ladies, you should know that women ages 18 to 24 are in the highest risk group for sexual assault. Gentlemen, 3% of men are also sexually assaulted in college. And the studies have shown that men who are involved in fraternities have been found to commit over half the gang rapes that are reported on college campuses. We also know that men's groups, and in particular fraternity membership, can be a causative factor of this hyper-aggressive behavior, sexual coercion and aggression in particular. So when we look at developing a plan, we recognize what circumstances exist, this is an area where we want you to be prepared. We want you to have a plan in place and know what you might do. For instance, what would you do in this situation?
So did you see the new event stuff? I forgot the name of it, but it's supposed to be really good. Do you want to go see it?
Seriously?
One more night. Come on. Really?
Can I pay, please?
Oh,
Can I go?
she's fine.
Ready to go?
Yeah, we can go.
Alright, let's get out of here.
All right.
Remember that song, Christmas Party?
Long time ago.
It's a lot of fun.
Stop it.
Just one more.
Seriously?
You gonna stay with me?
No, I don't want to stay with you. I have something else to eat, actually.
Please don't go.
No.
Come on.
Ready to go?
Yeah, all right.
Bill, bartender.
Come on.
Stop it, Tony.
So what would you have done in that situation if you'd seen one of your sisters potentially being assaulted? Or if you'd seen one of your brothers maybe being inappropriate with a young lady? Would you recognize it? Would you respond? If you believe in your core values, you would. We need for you to do that. That's what it means to be a real fraternity man or a successful sorority woman. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, any kind of sexual or gender-based harassment, stalking, dating violence is a part of the sexual misconduct code at New Mexico State. attempting or making any kind of contact, sexual contact, including but not limited to inappropriate touching, fondling, anything that is done against that person's will, or in circumstances where the person is physically, mentally, or legally unable to give consent, is a policy violation. It also is likely a violation of New Mexico state law. We take all complaints seriously, we investigate them, and we will adjudicate them. Don't let this type of behavior jeopardize your degree. You've put too much time and effort to get to this point, and we don't want you to jeopardize a significant expenditure of your time and resources. So let's talk a little bit more about behaviors that can be problematic and where you might be able to step in and make a difference.
911, where's your emergency?
I need to get an ambulance.
Where are you?
I'm in Boulder.
Where in Boulder? Give me an address.
1080 14th Street.
1080 14th Street?
Yeah.
What's going on?
We got a guy who's passed out. He drank way too much, and we found him this morning.
Is he breathing?
I don't know. He's not waking up.
Every year on America's college campuses, 700,000 kids are injured as a result of alcohol abuse, and 1,700 kids die as a result of alcohol abuse. 22% of America's college students meet the medical diagnostic criteria for alcohol or drug abuse or addiction, which means we have a major public health problem on our nation's campuses.
And this is at 1080 14th, correct?
It is.
How old do you think he is?
Maybe 18, 19.
How do you know he was drinking?
I got back last night, and a bunch of them were all drinking.
Okay, so he's passed out inside the house?
No, inside.
Is there an apartment number?
No, it's just a fraternity.
Okay, is he on the floor or?
He's on the floor.
A lot of times you drink to get drunk, but you can die from it. It's that serious. You can die.
How did we as adults, or even people who work with young people, where is it that we didn't give them the message?
I have seen students who get very scientific, try to make calculations about how much they can drink and what level they're going to have.
We're seeing an increase in binge drinking across the board with youth today.
And I've seen those same students wind up in the hospital with significant alcohol poisoning.
Where is it that we didn't say, if your friend is unconscious, you need to call 911?
You've got a small subset going crazy when they drink, and that subset is just going crazier and crazier.
Most kids come to college with pre-established drinking patterns.
It's 5 years and 15 seconds, not over 54 points he scored.
When they get to college and are surrounded by thousands of peers, often these patterns really become out of control.
We've created a culture now where from the highest levels of government to parents, we're not preparing our kids to take responsibility for their actions.
I don't think parents are aware of what their kids are being asked to navigate, particularly when they go to college.
700,000 kids are injured.
Always take advantage of it. Scrapes with the legal system, somewhere between 16 and 23%.
How's it going, folks?
11% of people had unwanted sexual contact.
Yeah! Right here. This is fucking ass to fucking face. You come here.
1% had rapes reported or unreported. Assaults, 11%. All of those those consequences of excess behavior have long-term consequences for the life chances of the college student.
If you were to go around a campus with some sort of problem detector that got louder as you get closer to the center of the problem, it would probably go crazy in fraternity houses.
Do you fuckers have any fucking respect for Hell Week? What do you mean my eyes are open?
In your average fraternity, on your average college campus, chapter presidents are 20 years old, are 19 years old, are under the age of 21, and they are the individuals specifically charged with managing a product that they legally cannot consume themselves.
Hazing may not be a big deal on any given college campus today, but if there's any form of hazing, the chances are that will continue to build.
Hey, give us more hot sauce. This kind of cold.
We're seeing some behaviors here that are making me think that the hazing is not to incorporate people totally into the group, but to use them more and more for cheap entertainment.
He's trying to take me away. I love this place.
So you can't tell if he's breathing or not?
It doesn't look like it.
You don't think what? It doesn't look like what?
It looks like he's breathing very much at all.
At all, or not very much?
Doesn't look like it at all.
One of the hardest things for me in thinking about Gordy is how easily it could have been avoided.
Chi Psi fraternity killed one of their pledges. There's a more politically correct way of saying that, but the reality is the Chi Psi's killed one of their pledges.
You're gonna go in groups of 3, and you have to be prepared, be on your feet, because they'll rip you apart.
They took their pledges up in the mountains, gave them a bunch of hard liquor and some wine and some beer, and said, "Don't come back until it's gone."
Once I was like, Gordy, Gordy, you're so fucked up right now. I took a picture of him to show him the next day, how drunk he looked,
His eyes were rolling back in his head. He could not verbally communicate. And the brothers knew he was in trouble because they took him to the library and put him on a couch to, just sleep it off.
And he certainly didn't understand that if he did find himself in a position of harm from this circumstance, that his brothers would sit there and simply carry him to a couch and lay him on a couch.
It was at that point where, somebody, I don't know who it was, got out the Sharpie. It was one of those things, it's tradition,
If he had writing on the back of his calf, my guess was he had writing everywhere else besides his face.
Your last memory of your friend is coloring him in or writing penis on his face.
I think it was only when they found out that Gordy had passed away that the brothers felt horrible about what they had done. It certainly made their intentions in writing on his body look even worse than they had intended.
Not only did these guys not call for help for this kid, but they're somehow trying to clean him up.
So they did their best to erase those marks from his body, unsuccessfully.
And so it first came in as this may be alcohol poisoning, and then it comes in unconscious, unresponsive, then maybe not breathing.
When the EMTs get there, he's already gone. He'd been in Boulder 3 weeks at that time.
There isn't a single commercial establishment in this country that if they served you alcohol and you collapsed in front of them would let you lay on that floor for 9 hours before making a decision to call 911. And that's the fraternity setting.
The reality is it wasn't the alcohol that killed him. He was hazed to death.
Definitely the hardest part is to think of him on that couch for hours with nobody helping him. The thing that makes me mad is that he was found on the floor, face down. And somebody could have called for help, and this wouldn't have happened.
All my cousins have their brothers and sisters and my friends, and I won't get to have that. I think that's the hardest part.
A mother losing a child can't do anything but feel like you've done a bad job. Your job is to protect your children. And I'll always feel a certain responsibility and a certain sense that I let him down. I let him down.
Are you ready to wake up?
So that was Gordy Bailey. He was a freshman from Plano, Texas. And interestingly enough, I had actually met one of his best friends. In fact, I was the advisor to the Fraternity Council at Texas A&M, and the vice president for IFC was one of my students, and he had brought Gordy to visit Texas A&M the year before this. So why did things like this happen? What is it that causes people to not step in when someone is in trouble? Why didn't they call 911? Why did they make him do some of those things to begin with? And what we know is that, in fact, our brains actually react to peer exclusion as much as they respond to threats of physical health or not eating. In fact, at a neutral level, in other words, when we perceive that social rejection is actually a threat to our existence, we'll do everything it takes to be a part of the group. We want to be accepted. This is what we think of as groupthink. When everybody decides that we'll do something, even though a number of people may think this is not a great idea, but they don't want to say anything because they don't want to be that person. Fraternities and sororities also have the hierarchy in place, and so we've been taught to be good students, to be good boys and girls, and so we seek to be obedient, to have respect for our authority figures, and or we perceive that this is the way that you develop this brotherhood or sisterhood. And let me share with you, this is not the best way to do that by any means. Alcohol is a reality in college. We know that. But it is important for you to recognize that your decisions potentially have consequences that can be deadly. We know that over 600,000 students are unintentionally injured because of alcohol, either their use or somebody else's. We know that students generally, when they choose to drink, they binge drink. That's generally because they're not of age, and so they feel like they have to drink a lot in a short period of time. We know that there are a number of people who are impacted by either unsafe sex practices or potentially find themselves involved in some sort of a sexual assault or sexual abuse relationship because of alcohol. And certainly it has an impact on academics, and stress and anxiety can be exacerbated because of alcohol use. We want to acknowledge that alcohol has a significant part in some of these problems. But it's not just the fact that alcohol is illegal, it's not even that college students drink, it's how much they choose to drink and then what they do afterwards. So my reminder to you is, remember, the legal age to drink in New Mexico is 21. If you choose to drink and you are not 21, recognize that you will pay the consequence if you get caught. It's also against the law to be drunk in public or drive drunk, and if you choose to make those decisions, be prepared to own up to your responsibilities and take it like a responsible adult. If you choose to do the crime, just recognize you're going to have to do the time. So what happens with someone who is suffering from alcohol poisoning, and what happens if nothing is done? Well, in this particular case with Gordy and many other victims, they end up choking on their own vomit, or their breathing slows down because alcohol is a depressant and it starts to shut down all of our vital organs, including our heart. The body temperature goes down. It doesn't warm us up. Contrary to popular belief, if you get cold, you don't want to drink because it actually lowers the body temperature. It can lead to seizures. And obviously, an alcohol overdose can lead to irreversible brain damage because of the oxygen levels. And in particular, binge drinking, using beer bongs or playing beer pong, it can lead to really dangerous outcomes. And it's important to recognize the symptoms of alcohol poisoning. And not be afraid to call if you recognize some of the symptoms. We need for you to step up, and in fact we have an amnesty policy. So if you see somebody who's in jeopardy, they've had too much to drink, please don't hesitate to call 911. We want you to be courageous. We don't want to be attending a funeral of a brother or sister. Some of the symptoms that I mentioned, this mental confusion and stupor, but if they pass out and they cannot be roused, if they start vomiting, if you notice that they're having some sort of seizures, call 911. These are critical symptoms that you need to be prepared to recognize and then be prepared to respond. That's what this is all about. We want you to remember, recognize, respond, and report. If there's a problem, don't play a doctor. Call for help. It is a violation of New Mexico State University policy to drink if you're a minor. If you purchase alcohol for a minor, that's also a policy violation. And the other things to recognize is organizations have specific obligations to follow university policies as well. You cannot use the fraternity or sorority funds to purchase alcohol. Open parties are not allowed, so unless there's a guest list, you shouldn't be having those. And membership recruitment and all new member activities are supposed to be free of alcohol. I bring this up because this is all a part of the rules, but it also can potentially lead to some issues with hazing. And if you haven't been aware of this, most states all have state laws, and they are cracking down on what used to be considered pranks, and in many cases pranks that have gone awry to the extent that somebody has been injured or dies. So states are taking this very seriously. For instance, in Texas, we saw this just a year ago.
20 Texas State University students have been arrested for hazing or failure to report hazing. So many, we couldn't even fit them all on one screen here. Police say Zeta Tau Alpha members picked up pledge girls, drove them over to the Sigma Nu fraternity apartment where they were told they were blindfolded, told to strip to their underwear, and then forced to drink alcohol to the point where some became sick. Now, we are still investigating this case right now. We'll have much more on it tonight on KXAN News at 10.
In this particular case, we saw a number of individuals that were arrested. In a Penn State case, we saw 4 individual members who were involved in the death of the Beta Theta Pi brother Tim Piazza, who actually were sentenced to jail. And then an LSU member was actually charged with negligent homicide as a result of a pledge hazing death. So this is serious stuff. We want you to be familiar with your responsibilities, not just as a fraternity or sorority member, but as a New Mexico State Aggie. I spent the better part of 29 years working at Texas A&M University, and 20 of those I worked with fraternity and sorority life. And unfortunately, I had too many instances where I had to have conversations with our fraternity and sorority members involving hazing or alcohol-related incidents. And I saw these are all headlines from cases that evolved during that time period, and I want to make sure that this is not something that I see happen here at New Mexico State. I share this with you not to scare you, but to simply get you to recognize that you need to step up and be a leader, and don't give in to groupthink. Again, use that recognize, respond, and report mantra to ensure that your chapter, your brothers, your sisters continue to be safe. As new members, you actually have some pretty significant responsibilities. You are a new member. They may refer to you as a pledge or an associate member or whatnot, but just because you're new doesn't necessarily mean that you have any less responsibility to uphold the reputation of your chapter. You are representing the chapter. You're being held to a different standard than just the average student. We look for excellence from our Greeks. You are responsible for the chapter's well-being. And so if you're thinking about having a pledge party or doing some sort of pranks or planning a road trip, recognize that when you go out and do that, you are representing whatever chapter you have become a part of. Also recognize that if you choose to have a party, you're being held to the same organizational standards where alcohol is concerned and as it relates to any kind of recruitment activities. So let's shift a little bit here to our biggest issue, and that is COVID. COVID-19 has taken our world and turned it upside down. And as we move through these unprecedented times, it's really critical for us, especially our Greek community, to work closely together. It is essential that you understand the facts about COVID, but your role in protecting the health and safety of our New Mexico State University community is key. You're expected to observe and comply with the Student Social Code of Conduct and our Academic Code of Conduct, but in addition, we expect that you will commit to take personal responsibility for protecting others here at New Mexico State. The Crimson Commitment that we have implemented this semester outlines what you must do as an Aggie to protect others and to protect our community from the spread of COVID-19 and other infections. We expect you to commit to protecting your own health by monitoring your symptoms, and if you feel sick, have any of the symptoms, that you will report that to the Aggie Health and Wellness Center, that you will wear the appropriate face mask or face covering as directed in our READY plan, that you will maintain appropriate distancing, not only on campus, but when you are out with your friends, and if you're at your fraternity or sorority houses, you're expected to follow these same guidelines. In addition, we expect you to help keep our community safe and keep New Mexico State open. Why is this so important? Because right now, colleges and universities across the country are being required or responding to large outbreaks by closing or going back to online. Oklahoma State University just quarantined a whole sorority house after they had 23 members test positive. The University of North Carolina Chapel Hill has closed because of off-campus parties, primarily fraternities and sororities. And we don't want New Mexico State to be a headline. We don't want, because of something going on in our fraternities and sororities, to cause us to rethink the reopening of campus. This was a news headline that hit yesterday, August 21st, and it involved several chapters that I worked with at Texas A&M University, and they have quarantined 2 houses, and I believe a third is getting ready to be quarantined. The biggest issue and why we don't want these things to happen is because we don't want to shut down campus. We want to remain open because it has significant financial and academic impacts. If we have to close campus, not only do our classes not look the same, or that educational experience doesn't look the same for our students, but all of the organization activities would obviously be discontinued. But our students who live on campus or live here in town may have to return home. And it may not be a good home situation. Certainly access for the internet across the state is questionable in many areas. Jobs, many of our students rely on on-campus jobs, and those would potentially be eliminated. So there goes potential monetary support. It certainly could lead to a decline in enrollment, which ultimately could result in layoffs and furloughs for faculty and staff. And then that could potentially lead to or jeopardize class options for current students, and even jeopardize the completion of degrees because of the lack of class sections or faculty available to teach them. Our community could potentially be devastated because we have a large number of apartments that rely on students to rent from them. Our restaurants rely on our students to be there to keep them open, and just this whole job loss trickle down could have a real impact. So please be thinking of this. We, again, have seen this at other universities, Michigan State, Notre Dame. We don't want to see that happen here at New Mexico State. Certainly, we can prevent that by just following the rules. Our Greeks, their core values, they're values-based organizations. We expect them to be leaders. We are holding our chapters to a higher standard. I hold Greek members to a higher standard. I expect a lot from our fraternity and sorority members. Resources, remember, you're not in this alone. If you have a question, if you struggle, if you need to talk with somebody, please recognize that the University Police, my office, and the Office of the Dean of Students, the Aggie Health and Wellness Center, our student involvement, and fraternity and sorority life area, we are all here to help you. So it's just a matter of a phone call or an email. We want to be there to be supportive and make sure that your Greek experience is successful, but that ultimately your academic degree is in hand at the end of your 4 or 5 years. So, once again, on behalf of my department, the Division of Student Success and Enrollment Management in New Mexico State University, I wish you the best of luck and congratulate you on your decision to check out Greek life and become part of the Aggie Greek community. I think you'll enjoy it. Stay safe. Be bold, be kind, shape the future, go Aggies.